Hi, everybody. Okay, this is the breakdown that I promised of the Age of Deception or the Age of Deceit videos. I had posted both of those at they were over 3 hours long each, and I had promised to break them down into segments so that people could download them more easily, and hopefully we can reach more people because there are millions, untold millions of people who would never click on a video that says it's 3 hours long, whether they were interested in the topic or not. But that being said, let me slide this over and show you guys. Over 400,000 people just in the last 2 months since I uploaded the first Age of Deceit video did click on it and watch it. So that has to restore your faith in humanity. People are waking up. People are absolutely waking up to what is going on around us. But anyway, as promised, this is these two videos here are going to be broken down into one 8-part series called the Age of Deceit series. And I'll put different subtitles behind the Age of Deceit title in every title line because this series is packed with information. There are 1,000 different things discussed in this series. It's not just one thing that we just beat over and over for 6 hours. We go through a ton of different topics. So I'll put those in the subtitle in the title line behind each one, but it'll be 8 parts. So this part you're watching right now is only one part of an 8-part series. And as always, I do encourage you, please watch all of the parts, because especially part 4, which would be the end of this full version, and part 8, which would be the end of the second full version video, both of those parts are really the most shocking. So it would be a shame if you watch just the first parts, which are more of an introduction to the topic, and you missed out on the really shocking information. And vice versa, I don't encourage skipping forward just to those parts, because the whole point of putting all of this together in one place in context is a laying the foundation sort of process so that people can receive this information, because a lot of it is really fringy and it's hard for them to understand it unless you put it in context of everything else that is going on around us. If you take just that one little interesting part out, like everybody does in a 8-minute sound bite, then it's just parody to most people. So that's why I put it all together in one place and try to bring these puzzle pieces together. So if you are interested in this type of subject matter at all, please do take the time to watch the entire series. Even if it takes you a couple of months, please do, because there are some real gems in every single episode of this series. But before I move on, I just want to reiterate that this is a cult. This is a religion. This is the red Kabbalah yarn, the red Kabbalah string that you're supposed to tie around your wrist when you go through these initiations into the craft, into this witchcraft called Kabbalah. And I mean, what are the odds that every single celebrity would be in the same church? I mean, that's crazy. For people to deny that this is not an organized religion because you don't see them all sitting in a church building together somewhere where you can walk in and see them all, the whole coven there together. But they're together somewhere, because look at this is all Kabbalah strings, no matter who it is. All of the most famous pop artists, all of the A-list actresses and actors, politicians, everybody, even these people who you don't even know why they're famous, but for some reason they're always on TV. If you can't see it, it is outright cognitive dissonance. It is outright denial. You're just simply in denial. And I'm sorry about that, but I'm showing you right in front of your face, whether it's Michael Jackson or Ashton Kutcher or Jessica Alba or Gwyneth Paltrow, I mean, Madonna, just everybody. Britney Spears, what's that gal's name? Ben Affleck's wife. That guy has always made me feel weird. You got the Rolling Stones, got the pansexual Disney girl there. I mean, it's exactly Demi Moore. Look, they're even tying it on their babies. Ugh. So you can see all of these stars, whether it's Charlize Theron, who's raising her son as a girl, making him dress like a girl and everything, even though he's only 6 or 7 years old, or it's just everybody else we see in the celebrity class. They all do it. So you can see Madonna, always, of course, she was pretty open about her Kabbalah occult teachings, but she's always wearing her string. You know, all the actresses, and Michael Jackson, you know, the king of pop, right? Yeah, there he is. Even though a lot of the Jackson brothers claim to follow Islam, there's Michael Jackson with his red Kabbalah string on. Beyonce, I mean, it's politicians, actors, singers, all, you know, our celebrities, the ones who consider themselves the ruling class. So my point is, it's a cult. This isn't just a social thing when you talk about the trans agenda and all of the rest of it. This is an actual religion. I mean, look, here's Paris Hilton just sitting there in a $3,000 dress. You think she's going to tie a piece of string on her arm? She's got bracelets worth more than my house. And she's going to go out with a piece of yarn tied on her? DiCaprio here. Seriously, you're going to wear a tuxedo? You dress to the nines in a tuxedo and you're going to tie a piece of yarn on your arm? Yeah, this is the real deal to them. They take their religion very seriously, and it is a religion. This is a cult, and they are all in it. Look at them. They advertise it. And then they go around giving each other awards right in front of us, these little idols of the fallen angel, right? It's got angel wings that are shaped like the lightning bolt, which we know is the symbol of Satan being cast out of heaven. And you know, we see that in everything. I'm not going to show pictures, but like say the AC/DC Highway to Hell logo, the AC/DC has the lightning bolt, the androgynous David Bowie leading people into sexual perversion. They put the lightning bolt on his face, and well, they're always painting the lightning bolt across people's face. Or they'll put it on their jewelry in movies, or they'll tattoo it all over their body. And it's just amazing that it's so right in front of our faces, but because we're under the spell, we can't see it. They even say, like the Egyptian Book of the Dead, that they're worshiping the dead from the underworld, from hell, and all of this. And then they'll have bands that they'll outright name the Grateful Dead with the lightning bolt. They're grateful to be dead. They don't want salvation. They don't want Jesus Christ. They're the Grateful Dead. And the masses just wander after them. After that frequency symbol, like Stephen King's books sell, they just wander after them. They blatantly tell you right to your face, Antichrist, devil's children, with the lightning bolt, AC/DC. They name their songs and sing right to our face, we're on the highway to hell. And they wear devil horns on the cover of their albums. They even put the flames and the Illuminati pyramid here, right on the highway to hell. And people are just enchanted. They're under the frequency enchantment of the music. I honestly talked to, and this is a family member who is a Christian, and I believe that they know Jesus Christ. But I was talking to him about back when we were kids and how they liked AC/DC so much when they were in high school. And they told me, well, I still like AC/DC. And I said, well, how can you worship AC/DC and sing hymns to Satan saying you're on the highway to hell? And they just looked at me like, huh? It's mind-boggling. I mean, it's not mind-boggling, it's science, and it's hypnotism, and it's mysticism and all of that. But the one thing it's not is hidden. It's not hidden. It's in plain sight. They are saying we're the devil's children. Come worship with us and sing, we're on the highway to hell. And everybody just does it. And then you tell them, you're worshiping demons. And they're like, what? You religious nut. But anyway, they give each other these statues, these little idols right in front of us with the image of the fallen angel with the lightning bolt wings, holding up this exact thing that I've shown you guys in like a dozen videos this past year. The real model of celestial mechanics, which is essentially the same as the atomic structure of protons, neutrons, electrons, nucleus, all of that. But anyway, yeah, you can see the celestial bodies, the luminaries up here and stuff. Oh, and it gets better. Of course, the Emmy Awards are from the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, right? And we all know how the cult or the cabal or Satanists, they invert everything. Everything's upside down and backwards. So like Harpo Studios, Oprah Winfrey's Harpo Studios, Harpo is just Oprah spelled backwards. And the OWN network is NWO, New World Order. That's where she broadcasts Super Soul Sunday and all of their occult theology and mysticism and New Age stuff. But anyway, anybody who studied this knows that that's their shtick. That's what they do. They do everything backwards and inverted. So what's the NATAS, right? The National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. NATAS backwards is SATAN, Satan. It's the Satan Awards presented by Satan. The Emmy Awards presented by Satan. It is just unbelievable and so profoundly sad for the children who come up through these satanic bloodlines and rituals, but also for all of our children who have been brainwashed by this cult and led astray to follow idols and to emulate the self-destructive behaviors of Satanism. It's just heart-wrenching to see our children so blinded and under the enchantment of these people, just mind-boggling that they can see if a cult like, say, Heaven's Gate, that remember the Heaven's Gate UFO cult, if they teach androgyny and castration, then that's, oh my, it's the worst thing they could ever, oh, it's a crazy cult. But when these people castrate their children publicly and teach androgyny and all the gender confusion stuff they're pushing, that's okay. If the celebrities say it must be true, right? If the ruling class tells you to do it, you have to do it. But if the Heaven's Gate UFO cult says the exact same thing, then they're crazy. The irony, the hypocrisy. Remember the Heaven's Gate cult? That's exactly what they taught, was this androgyny. All the women were supposed to shave their heads and become, because that was the ascended way. That's what made you higher than the regular people. To be more like the gods, you had to become androgynous. So the males were to castrate themselves and start transitioning, and the women were to shave their heads and start to look like men. So this stuff that the elitist cults are teaching the masses is nothing new. This has been in cults for a long time. But we don't just see these types of cults in the West. These cults are worldwide. Now remember in the last video when I mentioned the Hygeras from India, and these are these transvestites and transsexuals who do it to worship the god of destruction, this god of bisexuality and transgender and duality, androgyny, both in one, that same, that same thing. But anyway, they openly say they're doing it to serve a pagan god, and sexual energy is transformed into sacred powers. That's what they believe. So I mentioned this in the last video, but this is where I cut the stuff out, where I want to show that this goes worldwide, that this is everywhere. It's like the Masonic lodges, how they put one all the way down the spectrum into like every small town. You can't even go to a town that has like less than 1,000 people without finding that they've got their hand there and they have built a lodge there, a secret society there. So I just want to show that this transgender, bisexual, worship of the demons is worldwide. Like I was showing earlier with the culture, how they've overlaid their cult teachings onto every single culture. They've translated it into every single ethnicity. And again, not the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds didn't do this. The demons did this, the fallen angels, the entities who are above the Rothschilds, who we call the pagan gods of prehistoric or ancient times. And India was riddled with sexual perversion. We get the Kama Sutra from India, right? Which is an entire book of nothing but sexual acts. Every way you can possibly think, that they made sure and write it down. They were obsessed with it. And I can't put the pictures on here because YouTube won't let me put the video up then, because it's straight up pornography. Just search the images of the pyramids in India. Some of them are so vulgar that they don't even take tourist routes there to see them. They're like overgrown and stuff because they don't want people to see them. But you can get pictures of them. And every single image around the pyramids, around the temples, are every sort of sexual perversion you can imagine. Bestiality in particular, humans and animals and gods and demigods with animals, and like the actual visual acts. They wanted to see that nonstop. They put a lot of effort into carving thousands and thousands of statues so that they could see people having sex with animals in front of them in their culture daily. And not just bestiality, tons of homosexuality and orgies. And that was a culture that has an archaeological record of a tremendous amount of sexual perversion offered to their demon worship. Here's a documentary made by RT. It's called Enslaved by the Cult: Exploitation of Young Boys in Java's Ancient Tradition. This documentary does a good job of giving an example of what I was talking about, that in every culture, not just in the Vatican and in Western culture and Ashkenazi and Hollywood, stuff like that, but in every culture, there's a remnant of these Nephilim demigods and their practices. So their priests are called warlocks. Sounds a lot like warlocks, huh? These warlocks do not have sex with women because they say it steals their energy. And I can't play the clip for copyright purposes, but I will put the link below. And I showed you the title to the video so you can go and find it. And you can see them saying it out of their own mouths. This isn't supposition or from ancient texts. These people sit right on camera and say, yes, this is what we believe. So anyway, in lieu of women, they train these little boys and they essentially give them to these warlocks, and they never know anything different. Like the children who come up in these MK Ultra and SRA programs, these children never know anything different. They are just given to these men at an early age. And then as these sexually abused and exploited boys grow up, they then teach the younger boys how to believe this is acceptable. They teach them how to become transvestites, how to apply the makeup and everything as they offer themselves up to these men. But these are the little boys. They start out as little boys. And this is real. This isn't RuPaul's drag show. This is going on all over the world. Even here in the West, now you can see, just get on YouTube, and there's 5.1 million. 5.1 million views. 4.7 million views. 1.2 million views of our boys, showing our little boys. Look, these are little bitty boys. Showing them how to be Hygeras, or how to submit themselves to our version of this very same sex cult here in the West. And of course, like the red bracelets I showed you, the red Kabbalah bracelets, our version is openly Kabbalah, which is ancient Jewish mysticism, but it's everywhere in the Middle East. Like here, the Kaaba Allah, the Islamic people, they don't even know that it's the same thing, Kabbalah. But we see the same type of behaviors. We know that a lot of the Islamic leaders have children. They take children as concubines and wives. Even Malcolm X's mentor, Elijah Muhammad, had a 9-year-old wife. So do your research and know who you're following, which is what the Kabbalah, what the Cabal practices. The form of witchcraft that they practice comes from the Kabbalah, the Zohar, and the Talmud. And the synagogue's Talmud says the same thing. Please do not confuse the Talmud with the Torah. As you can see, the Talmud is all these books. They have nothing to do with the Bible. These were written by people who called themselves rabbis from this cabal, from this mystery school over the many years. And then they put them in this library and they call it the Talmud. That is not the Torah. The Torah is the 5 books of Moses. You know, Moses is of our forefathers, the humans, the Hebrews, not the synagogue of Satan. So again, I'm not making this up just to like demonize them and say, oh, I don't like them, so they're all demonic. No, I'm just quoting what the Bible says, what the records of world history say. And Jesus Christ himself called them the synagogue of Satan. So in addition to the verse that I always quote that says they claim to be Jews, but they are not, they are liars, they are the synagogue of Satan, there are tons of other verses, and not just that initial one back in the Old Testament, Genesis 6, the popular one that speaks openly about them mating with human women and creating these demon spawn, Nephilim, Raphaim races. But here's John 8:44 in the New Testament. The Messiah states openly that these bloodlines descend from Hasatan, the evil, the corporate body of fallen Elohim that served Lucifer. But they've been through the sifting process now, and all of the glory has been stripped from them. All the life has been stripped from them. All of the light has been stripped from them and gathered together and redeemed through Jesus Christ. So all that's left now, there is no Lucifer. That name has been erased. Because in the Bible, names are definition. You'll notice even when people got saved, their names changed. So all the way back to the Old Testament, it said, and he was born such and such, and he was named because, and they give the definition of his name. So anyway, Lucifer does not exist anymore. His glory has been taken from him, and everything redeemable, every redeeming quality has been resurrected and redeemed through Jesus Christ. And now what we have left, it says, is a waste product. The Bible says out of all of the fallen Elohim, the only ones left serving Satan are the corporate bodies of death and Hades. So that's what Satan is comprised of now, not light, not anymore. So these Masonic lodges and bloodlines who think they're worshiping Lucifer, they're just delusional. There is no Lucifer. They're worshiping Satan. That's all that's left. Anyway, in John 8:44, Christ says it openly. He says, you belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. And that is why this is the age of deceit. Because the ruling class simply speak their native language. They are liars and they descend from the father of lies. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth. And they have chosen to conform to his image instead of conforming to the holy image of Yeshua HaMashiach, the Christ. And in the Talmud, they speak openly about this pedophilia with children as young as 3 years old. It actually says that. It's absolutely disgusting. Okay, here's another evidence that this is the same exact Babylonian cult that I just showed you clips of with the Warrocks in Indonesia, and how they don't have normal sex with women, but they think it's okay to have perverse sex. Now, this is precisely what it says in the Talmud. This is not coincidence. This is one worldwide cult that descended from ancient Babylon, which was the compilation or the melting pot of all of the fallen angels, who are the pagan ancestral gods of ancient times, who we've been told are mythology. Although we see all the evidence all around us, whether it's medical evidence, DNA evidence, archaeological record evidence, and now here, as I'm showing you, even in all of the religions of the world, they were not mythology. This is the history of the world and the origin of evil.
Bondmaid, one is guilty only in the case of natural connection, but not in the case of perverse connection. The Pharisees reasoned that rape in a perverted manner is outside the jurisdiction of the law. Normal rape, however, was punishable. In Babylon, sexual perversion of every kind had been a way of life for millenniums. The Pharisees were deeply influenced by such practices.
In 3 of the major treatises of the Talmud are found extensive passages which give legal endorsement to seduce and marry 3-year-old baby girls. In fact, many of the greatest rabbis of the Talmud, including Simeon ben Yochai, upheld this privilege.
The footnote to this passage says, as tears come to the eye again and again, so does virginity come back to the little girl under 3 years. The same section confirms that sexual activity with small boys is in the same category. The intercourse of a small boy is not regarded as a sexual act.
When the church split and half of us went on as Judeo-Christians into holiness, that synagogue of Satan also continued on in their ways of murder and the ways of Babylon and all of that stuff. So I left out the most graphic parts of the Talmud because I didn't think YouTube would let me keep the video up if I put them in there, and this is just really hard for me. This stuff is really hard for me to talk about. And I'm sure any of you out there who have had small children, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's unbelievable. It's almost unbearable to even think about it. Okay, I paused and I composed myself, and now I'm back. Now, like I've said ad nauseum in all of my videos, especially this last series, that the Ashkenazi Jews, the Khazaria Mafia, the Jesuits are all the same thing. And that's why we see the Vatican hierarchy all wearing the Jewish yarmulkes. And that's why we see the endless thousands upon thousands upon thousands of prosecutions for pedophilia within the Catholic Church hierarchy. And that's why they cover it up. That's why there's so many cover-ups. Because behind closed doors, this doctrine that comes down from the Babylonian mystery schools through the Jewish Talmud and all of that, it's sanctioned. They don't believe that it's wrong. So when the laws of the land, the laws of these humans in all of these different countries catch them when they're trying to superimpose their cult, their culture on top of every nation in the world, and they get caught doing these things, their answer to that is just to try to cover it up or to move the priests to another parish where they're not known and things like that, instead of turning them over to the authorities. The sad part is now the authorities in most nations have been infiltrated and are from this same cabal. So the cover-ups, even if you do contact the police, you'll see that the police forces and the judges and the politicians are largely in on it. Not all, but you know the infiltration is thick. And that's why we see, just like with the Warrocks, that they won't condone sex with women, but they will condone perverse sex. We see in the Catholic Church that the priests take a vow of celibacy, what they consider celibacy, and they don't have sex with women. But like the article I showed in the last video, the first half of this Age of Deceit, that they just got busted this summer for large homosexual drug-fueled orgies in the apartments of these Catholic hierarchies and stuff. So it's not just pedophilia. In fact, like this article talks about, that a lot of what we are calling pedophilia are these priests grooming young men who are of the age of 18 or older for sodomy, because they don't see that as breaking their vow of celibacy. Like I just read you the texts, and there they are in their yarmulkes. And you know, in the last video, I talked about that directly and gave the Bible verses, like in First Kings. And you know, the book of Kings, that's exactly what it was. It was the book of the kings of the nations back then. The Bible is a history book. But anyway, it goes into length about these temple prostitutes, exactly what I was just talking about in the Talmud and in the Vatican Jesuit hierarchy, that they kept, that's what these royal families did. They kept sodomites, which were temple prostitutes who were transvestites, that they made dress up as the opposite sex so that they could do all of these perverse acts with them. I mean, you can read about it. That was the story of Jezebel, how she brought the sexual perversion back into the temples and all of this. Same thing we're going through all over again, but there's no denying what it's talking about. I know a lot of people think there was just like the one story of Sodom and Gomorrah that was destroyed for this type of thing, but no, this was something that was battled throughout all of ancient history, and the humans weren't allowed to do it, but the Nephilim races, the pagan gods, they did do it. They made all of their dynasties practice this, because they were all embodied by those spirits, by those demonic spirits, and that's what they enjoyed. every form of wickedness. But anyway, here in the book of the royals, 1 Kings 14:24, and there were also Sodomites in the land, and they did according to all the abominations of the nations which the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel. And then Deuteronomy 22:5, which was about the cross-dressing, the actual transvestites in that day, and all the makeup and the stuff that we see again today now as they resurrect the kingdom of Antichrist on earth. Deuteronomy 22:5, the women shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's clothing, for all that do so are an abomination unto the Lord thy God. So the point is, this is nothing new. In fact, we can trace all of this transvestite culture as well as castrating choir boys and all sorts of stuff all the way through the Vatican history. And yes, they do a pretty good job of covering it up. But here is a female pope. Her name was Pope Joan, or they called her Johannes, obviously. But this is a woodcut from 1473 showing how she was exposed because he, the Pope Johannes, he was in a procession walking when he went into labor. And this is the woodcut of him, Johannes, Pope Johannes, who now is known as Pope Joan, who gave birth, went into labor and gave birth in front of all the people. And that's how he was exposed as being a woman and was eventually put to death, in fact. And you can see the hierarchy with the double cross. I've done videos on that before. That's where we get the double cross, the word double cross. When you double cross somebody, you pretend to be something that you're not. Like you pretend to be Christians when you're actually the synagogue of Satan. Or you pretend to be a male pope and you're actually a woman. The double cross. But anyway, you will have to do quite a bit of digging to find all of the artwork and the records and the statues of Pope Joan and stuff that still remain, because they did try to destroy the most of it, but you can still find these. And there weren't just deceptive transvestites masquerading around in that culture. They also castrated prepubescent boys to make performers out of them. And this was right up till like 100 years ago. It wasn't outlawed till what, 1870 or 1903, something like that? Again, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is a fact. In fact, it's common knowledge. Look it up, castrato, or I think the plural of that is castrati. And castrati were known throughout all of world history, especially in the Catholic Church. The choir boys would be castrated prepubescent to freeze them into that state of prepubescence, that voice range, that soprano voice range, so that when they performed for the ruling class in these operas and stuff, they had an unbelievable, unrivaled range, a vocal range that was so much higher than, you know, a falsetto like upper register, that was so much higher than any normal human could reach. And that was because they were castrated, the performers. This is real. I know it's unbelievable, but this transgenderism and the castration and all of it has come through these bloodlines from ancient times. I mean, just go down to the history, dating all the way back to ancient Sumer. In a Western context, eunuch singers have known to existed as early as the Byzantine Empire. If you're going through primary documents, this might be helpful. Castrati were rarely referred to as such. In the 18th century, the euphemism musico or musici were more generally used, although it usually carried a derogatory implication. Another synonym was everato, literally meaning emasculated eunuch, was a more general term since. Historically, many eunuchs were castrated after puberty, and thus the castration had no impact on their voices. And that is corroborated by the Holy Bible. There's just limitless verses about the eunuchs in the courts of these royalty and the kings and kings courts. Even remember Esther, in the book of Esther, it says that the eunuchs tended to all of the women who were vying to be the queen, preparing them and helping them with their clothes, similar to what they've given us as our fashion designers. These eunuchs, which by their own definition here means emasculated. emasculated men. And we still see them as our fashion designers. But in biblical times, they were also recorded as such amongst the royal ruling class. And remember, there was that verse about Philip, that one of the eunuchs got baptized and got saved. He was riding in a carriage with Philip, and he asked him, what must I do to be saved? And Philip told him, receive Jesus Christ and be baptized. And they got out, right? They stopped the horses right there. They got out, they went down to the river, and Philip baptized the eunuch. So again, for people who might be viewing this subject with hate in their hearts, you must know that these people can be saved, and we need to be praying for them. Whether they have been transgendered either willingly or against their will, they still can be saved. And whether they are genetic hybrids, Gentiles, the Gentiles can be saved. That's what the Bible says. And in my personal opinion, two of the most tragic stories of these castratis singers would be Amy Winehouse and Whitney Houston. And of course, you don't have to leave me 1,000 messages that it's just supposition. Yeah, I get it. No, I have never been in their pants. I've never seen inside their pants. I'm just, like I said, this is my opinion from researching their lives. It's my opinion that these are two tragic examples of the castrati singers. And don't get me wrong, this isn't hate at all. My heart is torn apart for these little children. You know, this is Amy Winehouse when she was a little boy, most likely. My heart is just torn to shreds for these little children who grow up in these SRA families. Just like the little boys I showed you in the Indonesian festival for the Warrocks. It's hard to even watch and imagine. And it's like, why isn't somebody stopping this? But rest assured, someone is coming to stop this. Jesus Christ is coming to stop this. He is long suffering, and he has suffered a long time waiting for all of his children to come to repentance. But there is a time that enough is enough, and that time is now. Let me find that tattoo that Amy here has on her arm. Talk about MK Ultra. This breaks my heart. Here it is. It says Daddy's Girl, and then it has an S&M bondage naked woman below Daddy's Girl. Seriously? Once your eyes are opened and you see this drag show that they have created for us, you look at Lady Gaga and Amy Winehouse, how even RuPaul's drag show doesn't use these big wigs and the, over the top drag show stuff that they put in front of us. They've done this to program us. Like I showed you in the last video with the transgender beauty pageants and model runways and stuff, that some of them they have made very almost indistinguishable on purpose to confuse us, because they exude energy, a masculine energy or a feminine energy. So we don't realize we are being programmed. Our sexual attractions have been programmed because they present a body that gives us a stimulus, a physical stimulus, to have a sexual reaction to that. But then the souls are still there. This is still a male. So it confuses our senses because we are tuned into that transmorphic field. We are connected on a subconscious level. So while part of us is sensing that this is a male, part of us is being given a physical flesh stimuli to be attracted to it as a female. They literally programmed us for sexual deviance. So they don't make all of them dress up completely indistinguishable, as women. They purposefully parade things in front of us, like these big drag queen wigs on Lady Gaga and say Amy Winehouse, and like they did with Madonna with the really thick man eyebrows. And remember how Madonna didn't shave her armpits. And then some of them, they keep their male names to confuse our psyches, our subconscious, like Daryl Hannah, that we will still call her a man's name Daryl, even though on a conscious level, we're not making the connections, but on a subconscious level, they are programming sexual confusion. It's very literal MK Ultra to the masses, and you can see it's worked. It has worked. They've programmed our subconscious for generations now, and look how it has manifested in human society. And it really is amazing how the mind works, because once your mind is free, you look back and you're like, how did I ever miss that? You look at something like this and you're like, okay, I'm clearly looking at a man, like I'm looking at a man. But when you're under their spell, you don't see that at all. I never saw it at all. Never even entered my mind, because they said this is a woman. That's what they told me. But again, with the sigils and spells from the very beginning, her music videos and her couple of movies, she was always wearing these sigils. She was always wearing the Illuminati symbols. And like we've all begun to notice now, that even her halftime shows and her dance routines, they were all rituals. The same with Daryl Hannah. Even though I look at this now and all I see is just a man sitting there with long hair, a guy named Daryl, I just look at it and I think, how on earth could I have missed that? It's not really even a very convincing deception. But even after Daryl Hannah started having all the plastic surgeries, it's still not very convincing. But somehow I never questioned it, not once, never even entered my mind. I was completely blind to it. But now that the mystery has been dispelled, it's like looking at a bad episode of Bosom Buddies. In fact, even the lyrics of Dude Looks Like a Lady, how many of you sang along with that? I did. I didn't pay attention to what I was actually chanting. But yeah, the lyrics of that song aren't just saying, oh, he was shocked because this was a transvestite, transsexual, homosexual that tricked him, but he was saying, embrace it and do it. So here's the lyrics right here. He says, never judge a book by its cover, or who you gonna love by your lover. Love put me wise to her love in disguise. She had the body of Venus. Lord, imagine my surprise. But then you go on down and he doesn't say he ran off or anything. He said, yeah, he took part in this homosexual, transgender, transvestite sex thing. He says, baby, let me follow you down. Let me take a peek, dear. Do me all night. Turn the other cheek, dear. Dude looks like a lady. Dude looks like a lady. So yeah, even way back then, we didn't realize it, but not only were they preaching this, but they were programming it into frequency music and beaming it into us where we didn't even really know what we were saying, but we could all pull that up out of our consciousness, so we know we're programmed with it. We've been programmed with it for decades to embrace it. If we're tricked by a man that looks like a lady, that we should take part in that sexual act. Frequency programmed our brains. And if you don't believe that, stick around till the end of the video where I talk about Laurel Canyon and these secret military bases. It'll blow your mind. I mean, you can see how we overlook things like the symbols for pedophilia that the FBI watch list shows us now because we just weren't aware. But an upside down cross, how did we overlook the upside down cross everywhere that was right in front of us for so long? So yeah, the Vatican, the Pope sits on the throne with the upside down cross. And they say, oh, well, it was because Peter was crucified upside down. We're like, oh, okay. But in reality, of course, we know that that's a witchcraft symbol. And it's in everything, not just the parts of their religion that they openly say are religion, like witchcraft and Catholicism. It's a sigil that the Beatles would broadcast, and it's a sigil broadcast through all types of music and movies and everything. It's always been right in front of our faces. We've just been in a trance. In fact, not only did we not notice it right in front of our face because we were in a trance, but the sigils are the very thing they're using to put us in the trance. These archetypal symbols that they have programmed into our subconscious, they are all around us. I don't want to leave too many of those pictures up too long, I guess, as if it matters at this point. But that's a lot of the subliminal messages. And if you want to know more about manifesting and using sigils to manifest, not to practice witchcraft, but to understand the witchcraft that has been practiced on us, just a quick search of sigil magic. Uh, you can get just endless witches explaining the sigil magic. And that's why we see what we call the Illuminati symbols and all of their logos and all of that. Yes, it is like Russian nested dolls, and everything has a quadruple meaning and all of that. But it's not just for them to identify one another like a secret handshake, and it's not just because they're laughing at us, putting it in our face, although all of that's true too. It's sigil magic. They put these symbols all around us because they're putting a spell on us, because everything that we take in to our five senses goes into our subconscious. So even though through most of our lifetime, and still to the sleeping masses, they don't know, but for most of our lifetime, we also didn't realize that any of these had meaning, even though they were programming our minds with them. It's sigil magic. And that's what this is when they're throwing up these signs and stuff. They are either implanting a spell or they are triggering an MK Ultra program that's already in us. And this enormous coven or this cabal, they absolutely know that they are casting a spell. It's not a coincidence. Hollywood is the witchcraft wand. The most powerful wand in witchcraft is said to be made from the wood of the holly tree, Hollywood, the wand they use to cast the most powerful spells. So it's not a coincidence that when they designed Hollywood to put us in this trance, to cast this spell or this enchantment over us, to broadcast these sigils to us, they knew what they were doing. This is, I mean, this is big. This is a large and powerful coven that goes back to ancient times, because even the very spot that they chose to put Hollywood was chosen on purpose. You know, they know where all the megalithic structures are and all the ley lines are. They have the ancient texts well beyond just the Book of Enoch to know where each of these fallen angels are bound. So the fact that Hollywood is in Los Angeles, the city of angels, again, not a coincidence. It's the city of the fallen angels. It's called the City of Angels, right in front of our faces. And you know, this land right here where the Hollywood sign is, it's called Griffith Park, but it's known for being cursed land. Just do a quick search. The terrible curse of Griffith Park. Everybody who had dealings with it, like, died prematurely, was poisoned, was shot, was all this, and it finally went into the hands of the government. But before it did, here's one interesting story. One of the owners of this property shot and killed his wife, and his story was in court that his wife and daughter were trying to kill him, poison him, I think, because they were conspiring with the Pope to steal the land, that they wanted that particular plot of land, and he was a farmer. Okay, and in the scheme of things, they're always like, okay, he was a crazy guy, right? Because he shot his wife and everything. But he only got 2 years in jail because the evidence that he presented was so overwhelming that they were plotting. But he only got a couple of years because the evidence was overwhelming. But, you know, again, we just chalk it up to, like, this says weird California. That's a weird California story. But knowing now what we know, everything in context with the Jesuits and the Pope, that, I mean, that sounds like a crazy story. My wife is conspiring with the Pope to kill me so that they can take this 4,000 acres of quote unquote sacred land, the city of angels, right? But that's the story. You can look it up yourself. So all the way down the line, Hollywood, city of angels. In fact, even the name California, Cali, look, they even in their movies here, they even spell it that way, Kali, although I think it has an H in it in the pagan Hindu goddess Kali. But yeah, even Cali, California itself comes from the name of this demon, this fallen angel. And so is it any wonder all of this other stuff that we see, right, that shouldn't make any sense? Like, why did they light the Empire State Building up as the demon Kali? Everybody's like, okay, whatever, and we just move on with our lives. But it means something to them. This entity out in California. Here it is, another goddess of destruction. Yeah, there is no H in it, so it's just Kali. You can see it's just another goddess of destruction, but they call her the goddess of time because it's actually the end of time or the changing of time or the fullness of time. Always accompanied with death and destruction, but of course, you know how they twist things around, so they say that's a creative force. But she's always depicted wearing this garland of skulls or the heads of men, which the legends say are other demons that she slayed to get their power, that she's just ruthless for power. And that person that she's always depicted as standing on is her husband or consort. This particular one in California is largely worshipped by the slaying of the masculine, which is actually usually pronounced Kali, but I'm saying Cali because we call California Cali. But she's almost always depicted with her tongue sticking out like that. And that's why, just like how the stars do the 666 and the devil horns and the V and all of that stuff, another one they do is this tongue. They stick this tongue out. And I'm not saying every picture that you catch somebody sticking their tongue out like some of these is for that, but some of them absolutely are. I mean, like here, she does it all the time. Miley Cyrus, poor thing, she does it all the time. She's always got her gigantic tongue hanging out of her mouth. Sticking out sideways is one way that Kali is usually pictured with it, and she does that a lot. But you can usually tell if they're doing it as a symbol of their Satanism because it'll be combined with this, you know, combined with the devil horns, combined with the V sign. Well, that's why they do that. It's just another sigil. It's just another, you know, with the one eye, like Obama, one eye, tongue out. New York, Empire State Building, California, the land of Hollywood, from whence they cast their spell upon us. And they've been getting more and more blatant about it for a while. Like, remember about 5 years ago when there was that outcry that right in the middle of a Major League Baseball game, all of a sudden they flashed all these sigils in all these millions of people's faces while they were watching the baseball game. And most people have no idea about witchcraft or about Hollywood or anything. So they were just like, oh, that's weird. That must have been an accident. Really? Well, here's the clip.
This is me. Look, just watch. Oh, look at this. Yeah, I have no idea what that means. Me neither. Baseball guys did know. Oh, I bet they do.
So you can hear from the commentators at the baseball game. This isn't something that somebody made up at home to, oh, look, they're flashing sigils. It was flashed even on the big screens at the stadium. And the commentator said, well, I don't know what that means. The baseball gods must be blah, blah, blah. You know, make a joke out of it and move on with your life. So not only for the people in the stadium, but also the people at home, these sigils were put into their subconscious for some reason. I mean, it's everywhere. There are some malls. I tried to find the shots and I couldn't remember the names of the stores, but in the malls now, there are several clothing stores that their logos are sigils, and their t-shirts and clothing and everything inside are just covered in these sigils. So you may see people walking around with t-shirts around you that are casting these witchcraft spells, these hexes and different things through sigils, thought forms. They're thought forms or archetypes, or, you know, there's a lot of names for them. But anyway, they're everywhere. They're on the clothing. I mean, we've noticed the uptick in dragons and skulls and death cult stuff on clothing. And we talk about Celine Dion, how she's putting all the New World Order sigils on her clothing, on babies' clothing and kids in her gender neutral push and all of that. But I mean, this is like flat out open witchcraft in the mall in a lot of these stores now. They're just out in the open about it. Just like here is Final Fantasy. It's rampant in the video games. They flat out call them sigils even. They're like, here, learn witchcraft. And these kids and people think they're learning a video game, or they think they're playing a game, but they're actually taking part in witchcraft. They do it everywhere. It's nonstop with the goats. This goat simulator, the video game. I mean, look how cute, right? It's just a cute little goat. It's just like farming simulator, the game. So everybody gets it, and then you open it up and start playing it, and you can see from the bundle, you've got the demonically possessed eye, and he's all torn apart, flesh torn off. Yeah, it's like the world's burning down, houses are burning down, it's killing nonstop. It's unbelievable. It a little bit deceiving with the cute little goat on the front, right? And am I making too much out of it to say that it's satanic? Here's a screenshot from the actual game where the goat is going out and grabbing people and dragging them into the center of this pentagram. The game is full of sigils, witchcraft sigils and stuff. And you can see the background, obviously, the world on fire or hell, that type of thing. So I'm not making too much out of this. This is what they do. This is their goat simulator. They're actually taking part in satanic rituals, taking part in the cabal lifestyle, and they're like, what's wrong with that? It's just a game. The problem is that it's real, that they are casting spells. I mean, right here, this is just from last month, November of 2018. The spells on Chilling Adventures of Sabrina are real, and the cast has tales to tell. And there's an article about how there was all sorts of weird stuff happening on the set, because in an effort to make the show as realistic as possible, they went out and bought real spell books, real witchcraft spell books. So while people are watching these shows and they're doing these spells over them, they're real spells out of satanic books, out of satanic witchcraft books, out of their own spell books. So they're saying to your face, hey, we are casting real spells over you while you're sitting under our enchantments watching these shows. If anybody still has TV and watches these programs and are programming themselves and allowing them to do these enchantments over them, please consider having your cable shut off and having that shut off. There's plenty, now that we have the internet, there is plenty of other things that you can use your mind to do. But anyway, the point of all that is that they are very consciously putting a spell on us and messing with our minds.
That thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while. It's a social validation feedback loop because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. Understood this consciously, and we did it anyway.
They are employing all sorts of scientific methods of hypnotism, is essentially what it is. It's hypnotism.